Hi guys, I'm Dr. Fear, and this is 5 true scary stories. Number 1. Emily, aged 19. My second year at college was a difficult one. I wish I could say it was due to the organic chemistry, or boyfriend drama, or anything other than actually what happened. I loved my hallmates, my room, and the fact that the dining hall was less than 100 feet away. Obviously I spent a lot of time there, and I got to know the staff. I had worked in a restaurant for 2 years before heading to school, and I could identify the struggles that come with being a food service worker, especially because I was at a notoriously snobby school, so I sympathized with the staff, having to deal with the rich kids and the entitled bullshit. Most of the staff were lovely, but one in particular seemed to take a real interest in me. He was a young white man, not much older than myself, named Matt. He always went out of his way to talk to me and ask me questions about myself and how school was going. One evening, I was doing homework in the dining hall around closing hours. Matt sat with me and we chatted for a bit. He said he was off to work and headed to his car to smoke a bowl before he went home and asked if I wanted to join. I had smoked a few times before, but I enjoyed it, and he seemed harmless enough, so I agreed. I was still very much a sheltered child, and to me, he didn't seem like a bad guy, so he couldn't be. We lit up in his car in the parking lot behind the dining hall, and I got a glimpse of the real Matt. He ranted about how his ex-girlfriend had recently dumped him, called her names, and told me unnecessary details about what they did in bed. The virgin in me at this point was extremely uncomfortable, only made worse by the paranoia brought on by the weed. He also went on about how much he hated the students at my university, especially the girls, saying that they treated him less than human. I was completely speechless and didn't know how to respond. He tried to apologize for going off, saying that I was different, and that he wanted to get to know me better. I remember blurting out that I needed to go, and I got the hell out of there. He got out too, and shouted after me to come back, and I thought he might chase me, but he didn't, and I got back in my room safely. I avoided that dining hall like the plague for the next week, and I didn't see him again until the one night that still haunts me to this day. Around midnight, I was walking back to my dorm alone from a function at the Christian Center, which was only about 2 blocks away. I know walking by myself was stupid, but the buses weren't running, and I felt bad about asking someone to walk with me because there was some steep inclines between the center and my dorm. I was walking along an empty residential street that was just around the corner from my dorm, when I noticed a black SUV that was creeping along behind me. It was going so slow that it was hard not to notice. At first I tried not to panic, but it quickly clicked that it was the same car as Matt's. I started to run when it sped up ahead of me and a man in a ski mask jumped out at me. I just knew it was Matt. From here things went very fast. I tried to run the other way, but he grabbed me from behind and was struggling to get my wrists into handcuffs while simultaneously pulling me towards his car. I was screaming at the top of my lungs and fighting like hell. We fought each other for a few minutes like that before he dropped the handcuffs and I was able to slam my heel into his foot. I think those two things and my relentless struggling shook his confidence because he ran back to his car and sped off. Freaked out, I ran back to my room, constantly looking back to see if he was after me. Thankfully he didn't follow and I was able to call the police. I was very lucky that night, not only because I got away, but also because he was captured shortly after I called 911. He was arrested, and when the police searched his car they found handcuffs, duct tape, and a knife. During interrogation he confessed that he was bitter and depressed over his breakup and wanted to make someone feel the pain like he feels it. Nearly a year later, after a painful testimony from me, he was convicted to 40 years in prison, with a 32-year suspension for abduction and intent to defile. Matt, let's never meet again. Number 2. Nicholas, aged 16. About 4 or 5 months ago, I had a cup of coffee before going to bed around 9 PM. Now normally, coffee does nothing as far as keeping me awake. On this particular night, however, I did not get one bit of sleep. All throughout the night I was on my phone, as I usually am before going to bed, when I realized that it was almost 4 AM, and I did not feel in the least bit sleepy or tired. I started to hear what sounded like shuffling outside my window, which is about 4 feet across from my bed. Before I continue, I should mention that there are 2 windows to my room, which happen to be facing the street I live on. So my room is easily accessible to anyone who would be walking by. That's if they know the layout of my house. I had heard on the news earlier that it would rain overnight, so I opened up the weather app and sure enough it said that it was raining. The noise kept on for about 5 minutes, but I was so sure it was the rain that I didn't bother to get up and see what was actually going on. Suddenly I heard a thud on my window. Extremely startled, the only thing I could think of was turning on the flashlight from my phone and pointing it at my window. The noises almost magically stopped. I sent my brother a text to ask if he was at home, thinking maybe it could have been him trying to scare me. He said he wasn't, so I told him that I had heard a noise outside my window and suggested he keep his eyes open when getting home. When I woke up that morning, I told my mum about it, and she thought it would be a good idea to call my dad and tell him. Don't know why, considering there wasn't much he could do from work. That evening when my dad got home from work, he walked over to my window and sure enough, there in the dried up mud was a set of footprints that were big enough to belong to a pretty hefty sized man. It looked like he had tried to take off the screen to my window, which I'm pretty sure was the thud that I heard. Creepy man trying to get into my room at 4 AM? I hope I never see you again. Number 3. Oliver, aged 21. My brother's fiancée Laura worked as a landlord for a small apartment complex in downtown Milwaukee. A nice neighborhood, however the apartment was a bit of a dump. She and my brother were currently going through a medical school, so free vacancy was a great deal for them. She had dealt with the normal array of tenants, things like smelly rooms, bed bugs, noisy past hours, the usual. However, one day she had a strange occurrence with a potential tenant. A lady rang her and asked if a certain room number was for rent. Laura thought it was oddly specific, but said they did have a vacancy, just not in that room. The old lady explained that she used to live there and was hospitalized a while back. She left her apartment lease as she thought she'd be hospitalized for longer. Laura set up a time to look at other apartments in the complex and hung up. She then called a manager and discussed the old lady. Hastily, the manager said to decline the visit and to turn her elsewhere, as she was asked to leave not for following the rules of the complex. Apparently she hadn't been paying, and her room had stunk up the entire floor. Laura agreed, called her back later that week, and cancelled, citing all the rooms were, quote, booked up. I should mention that many of the workers that helped out the landlords were inter-city college kids, and not the most responsible. Laura said her job was a bit like babysitting, making sure that the cleaners and people that turned over the rooms would stay on track and get all the rooms ready for occupancy. So fast forward 2 months later, Laura is showing a few rooms off to her new tenants, when all of a sudden a rather large man walked out of his room and asked to speak to Laura when she had the chance. He was very calm and just said he was having a few issues with his room. Because Laura didn't want to scare them away, she promptly finished the tour and then took the man downstairs to talk. The man had said that things in his room were out of place and it even appeared missing. Things like his peanut butter and jam looked as if someone had been eating it. She had assured him first that it wasn't her, and that no one else in the apartment complex had keys. He then very calmly said, "I know it wasn't you. It's an elderly woman." She then asked, "How do you know this?" It was at that moment when she realised it was the same room the woman inquired about from before, and about those bumbling college teens who flipped the rooms for the manager. They had forgotten to change the lock. The man then said that twice in the last month he had woken up to a woman sitting in his chair, which was by his bedside, just watching him all night as he slept. When he asked why he didn't do anything about this, he said he was too afraid and just kept pretending to be asleep till she left. Once the lock was changed, they never saw her again. However, just the thought of waking up and having someone staring at you in the dark all night still sends shivers. Number 4. Alan, aged 16. My 3 best friends and I were bored on a Saturday, so we decided to go to the park a few blocks from Alex's house to play some basketball. We were there for maybe half an hour when Cam pointed out a man who was staring into the shrubs behind us, not moving. Alex told us to just ignore him, so we kept playing and didn't think much of him. A little later, maybe around 15 minutes, the sun is starting to set, we're done playing basketball, and we're just hanging around when Alex points out that the guy we spotted earlier is near the playground and was talking to a woman who looked scared out of her mind. We couldn't hear anything he said, but she looked panicked. The woman motioned for little kids to get down from the slides, and when they do, the man started screaming at the top of his lungs and trying to grab them. He grabbed the girl's hair and pulled her away from her mum. By this point, all of us just stood up and were getting ready to go over there. I'm pretty weak, but Cam and Alex are big dudes, and Jake was on our high school football team. The guy let go of the girl's hair and the mum started running towards the parking lot. A car had just pulled up. I learned later that it was her brother who had arrived to pick them up, and she was running towards the car with her kids in her arms. Jake, Alex and Cam looked at me, and we must have decided in that moment to go and help, even though none of us said a word to each other. It was just like a movie. The mum had just got into the vehicle and was trying to get the car door open to get her kids inside, but the guy kept slamming it shut. Cam and Alex got in between the man and the mum so she could get her kids inside the car. This guy starts howling like a wild animal. He tried to get around Cam when he realizes he couldn't just reach through them. He goes to the other side where Jake and I were. He can't just get past us either. But he was swearing and he was spitting and he was trying to push us aside. Right when the mum got into the passenger seat, he ran to the other side of the car and reached through the open window to grab the little boy. Alex punched him hard in the ribs, but he didn't even flinch. He kept trying to get at the kids, but thankfully the car pulled away. We start to walk away, but the guy is just screaming at us, says that we're selling drugs and we all have drugs on us. Cam tried to tell him that we weren't, and we're just kids, but he runs straight at Alex and shoves him to the ground. Jake was on top of him so fast it was all just a blur. Basically, Jake and Cam pulled him off Alex and pushed him away, but he charged at us again. Alex and Jake got a few good hits in. I kicked him in the stomach, and basically we beat the crap out of this guy. The police ended up catching the guy in the end. He's either in jail or in a mental institution. But Mr. Crazy Kidnapper, I hope we never, ever meet again. Number 5. Alida, aged 28. When my husband and I first moved out on our own, we had this neighbour that we would sometimes see outside, and we would talk to. We even went to the local pool hall and played pool with him. One day we were hanging out at his house and we were sitting outside. The cutest little black kitten walks up in the yard. My husband and I are animal lovers, so I love this kitten just like any other animal. My husband and the neighbour walk around the side of the house and are maybe gone a minute or two, and my husband returns. The look on his face was horror and fury. He looks at me and says, "He killed the cat." I get up and walk around there and my husband is holding this kitten. The neighbour had hit him in the head with a rock, but at this point the kitten was still breathing. It had knocked him out. Long story short, we took the kitten to the vet and he had to have an eye removed. We now have had the kitten for about 10 years and he is good now. He's one hell of a mouse killer too. We found out about a few years later that this neighbour had been thrown out of town for work and was rooming with a co-worker. He later went on to stab his roommate to death and returned back to his home here. It's scary to believe someone like this had lived right beside us, and had been in our home and we had been in his. Obviously after the kitten thing happened, we stopped talking to him, after letting him know what we thought about it and what a piece of shit he was. So, creepy ex-neighbour, let's never meet again. Thank you for watching, guys. I hope you did enjoy the stories, and I will be trying to release a new video every single day. So if you did enjoy the content, be sure to hit that subscribe button and like the video, and I'll catch you next time.